We're just 2 days away from the start of training camp, and one Notre Dame football expert believes that this is the best team they've had in a long, long time. Find out why in today's edition of Locked On Irish.
You are Locked On Irish, your daily podcast on the Notre Dame Fighting Irish. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's up, and welcome into Locked On Irish, your daily Notre Dame podcast, and today is Monday, July 29th, so thank you for getting your week started right here by making this your first listen of the day. My name is Tyler Wojciak, and I'm the host. I graduated from Notre Dame in 2018, and now I'm a producer at Fox Sports, and you can watch this episode as well as every other episode on YouTube, or you can listen wherever you get your podcast. This is your reminder to please like the video and subscribe to the channel if you are watching along on YouTube, or if you're listening to the podcast, please rate the show 5 stars, leave a review, and of course, subscribe. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Make every moment more. As playoffs wind down, the sports stop sporting like we want them to. But this summer, FanDuel is hooking up all customers with a boost or a bonus daily. That's right. There's something for everyone every day, all summer long. Just visit FanDuel.com to get started. Okay. I am so excited about today's episode. Over the weekend, I had the chance to talk to somebody who I've wanted to interview for years, and somebody that you are probably familiar with if you've been consuming Notre Dame football coverage at any point over the past few decades, because he has been covering the Irish since the early 1980s. It is Tim Prister, senior editor of Irish Illustrated. Tim and I talked for about an hour and a half, and we covered a plethora of topics. So here's how I broke it up. Today is part one, the first half of the interview, which is focused primarily on this year's team and the current state of Notre Dame football. Then in part two, which I'm going to release tomorrow morning, we took a stroll down memory lane and talked about the peak era of the Notre Dame football program, his favorite Lou Holtz stories, why another Notre Dame football coach actually threw a newspaper at him, and so much more. So you're definitely going to want to tune into that tomorrow. But as for today, Tim got me even more excited for the season to start, which I didn't even think that was possible, because he feels so strongly about this team and what they're capable of that I couldn't believe it almost. He is so confident they are loaded this year, and the future of Notre Dame football is really bright. Enjoy. All right, I'm joined now by a very special guest, Tim Prister, senior editor of Irish Illustrated. Tim has been on the beat longer than any active member. I look at him as the elder statesman of Notre Dame football coverage. He's even been referred to as America's foremost authority on Notre Dame football, so I'm very excited to have him here with me today. Tim, expectations for this team and this season are probably higher than they've been in a really long time, but when you look at the talent on this roster, the staff, the expectations from the outside, which Notre Dame team from the past does it remind you of?
That's a good question. I will say this. Let me start by saying this, Tyler. Thank you for having me, and I've seen your work, and you do a heck of a job. It's a pleasure to be here. The first thing, like somebody asked me the other day, when's the last time you were this confident going into a season? And I was unable to answer it, because as great as the 93 team was, which I know was a long time ago, you weren't born yet, but
I've heard a lot about him from my dad.
Yeah, but
I'm familiar.
Here's the thing. The year before, they lost so much talent. They lost Rick Meyer, quarterback, and they lost Jerome Bettis and DB Tommy Carter early after 3 years. So we went into the season thinking, and then the key there was that Ron Paulus, a freshman, was injured during preseason practice. He broke his collarbone. So there was a ton of talent on the 93 team, but I don't think that we were as I know that I wasn't as optimistic because of the losses the year before. So, I'm not sure what I would compare it to, but it reminds me of ultimately how we felt about the 93 team. Now, they had 4 first-round draft choices come out of that, so I'm not sure that we're quite looking at that. But this is a heck of a football team, and they lose so much after this year. And I know you can replenish now with the transfer portal, but Marcus Freeman has to strike right now. It's year 3, which has always been magic for Notre Dame head coaches. I think he's learned a ton. What I love about Marcus is his pursuit of wisdom and knowledge. And I think that he's gained a lot in the first 2 years. So the first team that would come to mind would be 93, because that ended up being a really, really great football team. Unfortunately, it was a tragic loss against Boston College at the end of the regular season, but that's what I'm reminded of.
Okay, I'm going to ask about that Boston College game, but that's probably going to be towards the end. Let's stay on a positive note here. You mentioned it, year 3 has been a pivotal year for Notre Dame football coaches, either good or bad, because Lou Holtz, Dan Devine, Parsi Jan, they all won national championships in their third year. Brian Kelly was a runner-up in his third year, although runner-up is kind of, I mean, it's technically true, but it doesn't feel that way just given how that national championship game went that year. And then for other coaches, the third year was kind of when things really went south and you started to realize that, hey, maybe this really isn't going to work for that coach. There is a ton of pressure on Marcus Freeman going into year 3. But what do you think are reasonable expectations for him this season? Like what do you think is the floor for this team?
Because of the talent that we talked about, and I've written this recently and I've said it on podcasts, they need to play 15 games this year. They need to win it. They need to obviously make the playoffs, win at home, then defeat whoever they're going to play. They would play at home either the 20th or 21st of December. Then they would play either New Year's Eve or New Year's Day. I think the least amount that you can expect from this team is to make the playoffs, win 2 games, get to the Final Four, and then see what happens there. And that means 15 games.
I totally agree with you. When you break down the schedule, like what it would look like if Notre Dame goes 11-1, or if they go undefeated, okay, then they're going to be the 5th seed. They're going to play a group of 5 team. Okay, then they win that. And then they're playing probably one of the better Big 12 teams or the worst SEC or Big 10 team to make the college football playoff. And then you start to think like, okay, it's not a matter of just winning 1 game anymore. It's winning 2 and then really putting yourself in a semifinal game. And then, you know, what if they get there, we'll see what happens in the matchup and things like that. But I agree with you. 15 wins or 15 games should be the expectation this season. But you already kind of mentioned it with Marcus Freeman. Something that you appreciate is his willingness to learn and grow. What other traits do you see in him that lead you to believe that he has what it takes to get Notre Dame to where they belong at the top of college football?
The fire and determination to be great. His motivational skills, or if you've seen some of their preseason videos, he's got a future as an actor if the coaching gig doesn't work out. But he's obsessed with it. You know, he's young, he's energetic, he's strong, he recruits his butt off. He is on point all the time. You hear and you read people say that, I don't know how he does it. He's here, he's there. When the men's lacrosse team is playing in the national championship, he's there. When a Notre Dame men's basketball team isn't very good, he still shows up to games there. He is just absolutely driven, and I love the pursuit of knowledge and wisdom. He was recently on Jim Tressel's podcast, and it's just fascinating to hear him. The podcast was well over an hour. And just to hear him talk about, I noticed this and I saw that and we want to do this. He refuses to accept a negative plight in life. He's as driven as a head football coach can be. He's learned a lot along the way. He's admitted that he had a lot to learn the first couple of years, and it was obvious when when your team's not ready to play Marshall, in game 2 of the season. But I think he's getting there. I think he's absolutely trending to being a very, very good coach, and perhaps much more than that.
Yeah, you look at his development from year 1 into year 2. The glaring weakness in year 1 was the loss to Marshall and the loss to Stanford, the fact that his team was not ready to play against weaker opponents on the schedule. Then they figured that out in year 2, but then they couldn't figure out how to play on the road. So I'm hoping that he's able to take those lessons that he learned last year and then apply it to year 3. And we're going to find out right away in the season opener against Texas A&M because that is going to be a very difficult environment to play in. But another thing about Freeman that's always interested me is he's a new school coach, right? He's a player's coach. He's young. He relates to players probably on a deeper level just because he's closer to their age than some of the other coaches in the past. But he does have a lot of old school tendencies.
He does.
His mentor is Jim Tressel, and he's about as old school as it gets. And I grew up in Ohio. I was very familiar with Jim Tressel's Ohio State teams. And then there was that video that came out last year. I think it was during preseason camp where he really kind of lit a fire under his team. He's like, there is a winner and there is an effing loser. And it was a side of Freeman that most of us have not seen. What other times have you seen Freeman that are, not necessarily like the perfect charismatic figure that we know of, but really like an old school football coach that you can relate to and you've seen in the past?
Just about every practice that the media has been allowed to go to. I think that great observations on your part, Tyler, number one, but I think that there's a misconception. He is new school and he is a player's coach, but trust me when I tell you that he can be extremely hard on his players. And, Brian Kelly had been a head coach for 2.5 decades or whatever. I think that he kind of settled in. And I don't know. I mean, Brian Kelly wasn't as hard in the last few years when they won 54 games in 5 years. It was working. Brian Kelly was not as hard on his football team as Marcus Freeman has been in his 2+ years as the head coach. He can be very tough. And I think, you've got to strike a balance because today's athlete is a lot different than it was than they were 20 years ago. I coached high school baseball from 2004 to 2012. And the attitude of players had changed during that time. You can't crush your players all the time like Lou Holtz frequently did. Now Lou Holtz would build them up to game day, but most of the other times he was crushing them. You can't do that on a full-time basis now. You've got to show them that you love them, that you care about them on a personal basis. And I think he does that. But he also is very hard on them in practice. And there have been some occasions, especially, I think, I want to say when he was at Notre Dame as defensive coordinator in 21, Drew White, there were some injuries that occurred on the practice field to some frontline players, Drew White, Maris Leofau, that, maybe some other coaches might have pulled back at that stage of the preseason or the year, but he didn't. So he is definitely a player's coach, but he strikes a balance. He's tough on them.
The way you describe it, it reminds me of a story that I heard about the first year of Marcus Freeman's time at Notre Dame when he was the defensive coordinator going up against Tommy Rees's offense every day in practice. And that was about as competitive as it gets, not only between like the actual players on the field, but the coaches themselves. Is that kind of what you're referring to with Drew White and just the competition and how heated it was every day in practice?
Yeah, no doubt. Now, Tommy Rees is even younger, but he has that same competitive fire. Yeah, there's no doubt. I mean, you have your pride on each side of the football, and nobody wants to be beaten. That's what like L. Golden gives no breaks to the offense. He's running what he runs. He's running his blitzes, and you better adapt. Otherwise, your offense is going to get its butt kicked. And that happened at times with Tommy Rees, and it certainly happened with Jared Parker, who was not as accomplished as a coordinator as Tommy Rees. I know not everybody ascribes to that notion, but I believe that to be true. And I think that Mike Denbrock has even admitted that, you better come ready to practice against Al Golden's defense because, he's not going to give you any breaks.
Yeah, and I think going into this year, one big talking point, the reason that so many fans are so excited is the staff that Marcus Freeman has around him. He has an established offensive coordinator in Mike Denbrock. He has Al Golden, who's proven himself to be one of the best defensive minds in all of college football, and he has some really talented position coaches as well, like Mike Mickens, Max Bola, Al Washington, and the like. So now that Freeman's had some time at Notre Dame and he's built his staff to what it is now, and it's so strong. I also got to mention Dylan McCullough too, because he's been such an integral part.
And Marty Biaggi too. I mean, he is among the better. He's not quite as good as his predecessor, but he is among the better special teams coaches in the country.
Without a doubt. Now he's helping out with the safeties as well, so he's pretty versatile in that way ever since Chris O'Leary left. But what does the staff tell you about Marcus Freeman and what he recognizes as his strengths and his weaknesses? Because he has two coordinators who are much older than he is, who have a lot more experience at the college level. But then again, his position coaches are a lot more like Freeman in terms of age, experience, and things like that. How do you think he has sort of formulated such a strong staff?
Well, he doesn't want to surround himself with yes men. and I'm not saying Brian Kelly did that, but Brian Kelly definitely preferred hiring coaches that he was familiar with. Now, Mike Brown, the receivers coach, Marcus Freeman, was familiar with him, but he doesn't want to be surrounded by yes men, and he wants to be surrounded, like when you say coordinators, his offensive and defensive coordinators are guys that are in their 50s, mid to late 50s. Denbrock might have turned 60.
Yeah, I think Denbrock's 60.
Yeah, he did. He's in my category now. But yeah, he wants to be surrounded by guys that have been through the wars and have the experience. And to me, that's a guy that has a lot of self-confidence because he's not worried about, oh, well, he may suggest this or may suggest that. He wants to be better, question everything. What he says he wants done is truly, what he believes in. So he surrounded himself with a really good staff. I know people are a little bit down on Mike Brown's recruiting with what's happened with the wide receivers, but I think that's overblown a little bit sometimes. Marcus Freeman could not have recruited Derek Meadows any harder than he did. So why don't we blame Marcus Freeman for that loss? No, people tend to blame Mike Brown for it. And I get that because the position coach is important. And Marcus Freeman did everything he could with a guy like with Meadows. But no, he's not afraid to surround himself with people that will question him and question, the specifics of how the program is being run.
We'll be right back with Tim Prister to hear his thoughts on the Notre Dame administration's buy-in to the football program and why it bodes so well for the Irish going forward. But first, I want to tell you about one of our new sponsors here, Ibata. Stock up on all of your grilling favorites and earn cash back on every purchase when you use Ibata. So you won't have to choose between burgers or hot dogs. You can get both. Ibata is a free app that lets you earn cash back every time that you shop. You can earn on hundreds of items from groceries to beauty supplies, even toys, so you can make sure you're beating inflation no matter what it is that you're purchasing. The average Ibata user earns $256 per year. That could cover the cost of an entire shopping trip, that flight you've been eyeing, or the fancy dinner that you've been craving. Other apps give you points that don't really amount to much, but with Ibata, you earn cash back that you can withdraw to your bank account, PayPal, or gift cards. Simply add offers in the app, upload your receipt, and voila, the money is yours. You can save on over 2,400 brands and shop at over 1,000 retailers, including your favorite grocery stores, Lowe's, Macy's, Sephora, Best Buy, and more. It's time you joined the over 50 million users who use Ibata to earn cash back every time they shop. Right now, Ibata is offering our listeners $5 just for trying Ibata by using the code LOCKEDONCollege when you register. Just go to the App Store or Google Play Store and download the free Ibata app to start earning cash back and use code LOCKEDONCollege. That's IBOTTA in the Google Play or App Store and use code LOCKEDONCollege. Today's episode is also brought to you by Factor. Warmer, sunnier days are calling. Fuel up for them with Factor's no prep, no mess meals. Meet your wellness goals in time for summer thanks to the menu of chef-crafted meals with options like Calorie Smart, Protein Plus, and Keto. Factor's fresh, never frozen meals are dietitian approved and ready to eat in just 2 minutes. So no matter how busy you are, you'll always have time to enjoy nutritious, great tasting meals. Make today the day you kickstart a new healthy routine. What are you waiting for? Because with over 35 different meals and more than 60 add-ons to choose from every week, you'll always have new flavors to explore. Crush your wellness goals this May with dietitian approved meals and ingredients that they can trust. Make your day delicious from breakfast to dessert. Stay fueled with easy, nutritious options. You can also treat yourself to restaurant quality meals that feature premium ingredients like filet mignon, shrimp, and blackened salmon. Keep kitchen time to a minimum. Factor meals are ready in just 2 minutes. No shopping, prepping, cooking, or cleaning up. Enjoy effortless supply for your lifestyle. Choose from 6 menu preferences to help you manage calories, maximize protein intake, avoid meat, or simply eat well balanced. Head to factormeals.com/LockedOnCollege50 and use code LockedOnCollege50 to get 50% off your first box plus 20% off your next month. That's code LockedOnCollege50 at factormeals.com/LockedOnCollege50 to get 50% off your first box plus 20% off your next month while your subscription is active. I think one really interesting thing that happened this offseason was the fact that Denbrock and Golden signed 4-year extensions. That is so rare in college football these days, to have coordinators around for a long time. I think the longevity of the coordinators at Clemson is a big reason why they reached the peaks that they did with Brent Venables and Tony Elliott. They stuck around for a long time, and I think that was so crucial to all the success that they had. And now hopefully Notre Dame is able to replicate that with Denbrock and with Golden. But that would not have happened without some serious buy-in from the athletic department and the university to pay those guys quite a lot of money. And I know that in the past, fans have rightfully been pretty upset with the administration's lack of investment, lack of complete buy-in into the football program, but that seems to have changed significantly in a pretty short period of time. What have you noticed outside of just the football program, but from the administration down? What have you noticed, some examples that you've seen from them where they are more invested in the football program than they've been maybe in years past?
Well, Jack Swarbrick was the one that said to Marcus Freeman, hey, I think you should consider Al Golden. He had met Al Golden at the beginning of his tenure as athletic director at Notre Dame. And, Golden walked into a really difficult situation in Miami. He did some good things at Temple, and Swarbrick believed in Golden, allowed Marcus Freeman to make that decision, but brought in the veteran guy. And then Denbrock is a guy, and again, that's a Swarbrick decision prior to, Pete Bavacqua taking over, that we're going to offer these guys, 4-year contracts. I think it's still possible that Golden could go somewhere else if he was named a head coach, but he likes being a Notre Dame. Denbrock, I've known Denbrock for more than 2 decades. This is the place where he wants to be. So, yeah, I think it took a lot on the part of Jack Swarbrick and now Pete Bavacqua to have enough trust in those guys. But if you're not going to trust Al Golden and Mike Denbrock, I mean, I'm not sure who you do. Now, Denbrock wasn't always tearing it up offensively, but when he left Brian Kelly, I think he proved himself with what he did with Cincinnati's offense and then took LSU's offense to another level. He had 3 first-round draft choices at the skill positions last year, but still, I've seen a lot of really good teams be ruined by poor coaching. So, yeah, great buy-in by Notre Dame. That's one thing, Swarbrick and Bavacqua, too. It's a partnership. It's not, Brian Kelly, I think, made it hard sometimes to be in a, quote, partnership with the athletic administration, but Marcus Freeman isn't. And it's a great buy-in. And I think your comment about what Sweeney did with his coaching staff and his coordinators, I absolutely agree. When you have that kind of continuity, some really great things can happen.
And look what's happened to him since they left. I'm not saying that they're going to completely fall off, but I don't think it's a coincidence that ever since they lost Venables,
transfer portal plays into that because he doesn't believe in the transfer portal. But I agree with what you're saying, Tyler.
Yeah, that could be a whole another podcast on itself. I'm sure many people in the Clemson media have had several about that. But you mentioned Pete Bavacqua. Jack Swarbrick and Marcus Freeman had and currently have a great relationship, and the way that they talked about each other, I always thought was so interesting, and just the respect and the admiration that Swarbrick had for Freeman and Freeman had for Swarbrick. It was really encouraging for the Notre Dame football program. Now Notre Dame has a new athletic director and Pete Bavacqua, who trained under Jack Swarbrick basically for an entire year, and now he has taken over as the athletic director for Notre Dame. What have been your early impressions of Pete since he is taking control over the athletic department?
I've really enjoyed getting to know him, and I really got to know him pretty well through the entire football season because he was around. He came in the previous summer and was around, and he was familiar with our work through the years, which was a really nice compliment. But I had multiple opportunities to interact with him, generally on the road for road games, and then even pre-spring this year when I had an opportunity to be invited to a dinner opportunity with him and some other people. So, I think Pete, he is really motivated to be in this position. I think we're going to see, we've already seen examples of where Notre Dame is they're embracing NIL. They ran from NIL when that first concept broke, because look, the whole idea of Notre Dame buying players, I've spent my entire life in South Bend and around Notre Dame. And, the concept of, hey, well, you can just offer a guy $1 million and he'll come play for you. That was really, really foreign to Notre Dame. But in order to stay competitive, they realized that they had to do what the other Joneses were doing. And so I think they've embraced NIL. I think you're going to see Notre Dame spend in ways, well, you probably won't see it because it'll be something that they don't talk about behind the scenes, but I think you're going to see Notre Dame open up the purse strings and spend, knowing full well that in order to contend with the rest of college football, especially the massive SEC and now the massive Big Ten, they're going to have to do things a little bit differently. So they've embraced these things. I think they've done a really good job of, I don't think they're going to bring in 20, 25 guys from the transfer portal because they still want that chemistry, within the program. But they've done a really great job of getting 7, 8, 9 grad transfers that fit Notre Dame, and we'll see how the new group does this fall.
Yeah, and I think that's the right way to do it, particularly with the transfer portal and NIL, because look at Ohio State. They're the clear front runners to win the national championship this year. They shelled out a lot of money. It's not even a secret. Ross Bjork, their new athletic director, said that he estimates Ohio State spent through the collectives and different NIL revenue streams that his team is probably worth $20 million this year. They added Caleb Downs and other really talented players in the transfer portal, but they are not building their team through the transfer portal. They have had either the number 1, number 2, or number 3 recruiting class pretty much every single year since Ryan Day took over. So you can supplement the team via the transfer portal, but if that's what you're relying on, it's probably not going to work. And I think we've seen that with teams like Colorado, Miami, other, big NIL schools who are just throwing money around. I don't think that'll ever be what Notre Dame does. But with Pete Bavacqua and Marcus Freeman, they're both younger. They both have different, a different approach, I would say, to football than maybe Brian Kelly and Jack Swarbrick. But specifically Bavacqua, how do you think he's similar and how is he different than his predecessor, Jack Swarbrick?
I think that the same desire and motivation to be great and win a national title is comparable. I think with Bavacqua's background at NBC, he's got a little bit better understanding of an even larger program, so to speak, the magnitude of it, even compared to Notre Dame. So I think he understands that, you can't be shy about NIL. You can't be shy about, shooting for 5 stars. Now, here's the tricky part that you've got to, and Freeman has hinted at this. They're still all in on recruiting high school seniors. They have to do that, but they're picking and choosing and being very careful about the grad transfers that they bring in because Notre Dame is different, man. I don't care what anybody says about Notre Dame. If you haven't experienced Notre Dame, it is unlike any of the major powers that they're competing with. It's just a completely different environment. And so Freeman has said, we've got to get not only the kids that we think that fit at Notre Dame, but the ones that truly embrace and love Notre Dame. Now, how do you determine that when you're grabbing guys from the transfer portal? They've come to find out that there's a lot of poor money spent in the transfer portal. Guys are asking for, marginal players are expecting 800,000, 7 figures. And I think Notre Dame has found out that you have to have a little wisdom in who you choose to recruit and spend that money on, which is why they've doubled down, on the high school recruiting. But I think Bavacqua was going to be very forward thinking. I can't say that I know everything about him because we really haven't seen him fully in action yet. But he's a younger guy. I think that was needed. I think Jack Swarbrick himself would say that, the job beat him up pretty badly. He's older than I am. I think he was 4 classes ahead of me at Notre Dame. So it takes a younger guy with a little bit more energy and enthusiasm. And I think, Tyler, much of what we learn about Pete Bavacqua or know about Pete Bavacqua, you and I and others on the outside will start to learn more about him as we move forward.
Yeah, I have had the chance to talk to some people who are very close to Pete, and the one thing they say is, at his core, he loves Notre Dame and is a diehard Notre Dame football fan. So he shares a lot of the sentiments that a lot of fans share. Not all of the fans, not like a little of the extremist fans, but when it comes to what he wants out of the Notre Dame football team, I think that most fans would be very happy to hear what he has to say. But I want to go back to this upcoming season. We are just a few days away from the start of training camp. Like we said at the very beginning of this, expectations are really, really high. I understand that media availability is going to be a little bit limited this year for the practices, but what are you most interested to see when the Irish take the practice field?
Wow, there's so much. We just finished a team meeting, so to speak, at Irish Illustrated, and that's what we were talking about with some of the storylines, and there's so many great ones. Riley Leonard is inspiring a lot of people because of what he did over the summer at the Manning camp, his ability to run the football, which Sam Hartman didn't really have or wasn't really willing to do many times. You've got an offensive line that has a chance to be really good, but it's very young right now. A receiver, who would have thought, if we would have done this a year ago, that Notre Dame would have a receivers room like they have now? It's incredible.
Even if we did this in December, I would be like, hey, I think I might have a year left of eligibility.
Exactly. Exactly. Or how about when, Chris Tyree and Rico Flores in particular decide to leave? It's like, oh my God, what are they going to do? They have, I do a first rate series through the summer where I rate the positions and what have you. I try to go into that with an open mind. Until I study everybody, I don't know. They finished first in the receiver category. Whoever would have thought that? So that's going to be fascinating. The sooner they can get Mitchell Evans back, the better. I think the tandem of him and Eli Raritan is fascinating. The defensive line should be great. I think they have depth. When you look at Jason Anya and Gabe Rubio, I think they're going to be that much better this year. And speaking of Texas A&M, those are two great defensive lines going in that game. So that, to me, looks like a very low-scoring game right now. The linebacking core, you have Jack Kaiser and a bunch of young guys that you really don't know how good they're going to be, but man, it sure is promising. And then you throw in Jalen Sneed, who's, had a couple of years to get his feet wet, but Drake Bowen, Ausberry, and KVA, who is probably going to push for a starting role along the way. So very interested to see what Rod Hurd does in tandem with Xavier Watts. They need those cornerbacks to come through. It's just, I think there are so many fascinating storylines when you go position by position, simply because they're loaded, man. They got a lot of talent.
You caught me off guard a little bit when you said the offensive line has a chance to be really good. I hope you're right.
Over the course of the season, I think Ashton Craig is going to be, Ashton Craig, before he leaves Notre Dame, will contend for All-American honors. Billy Schrouth is about to blossom. Charles Jagasa, I get a lot of heat because I say he's a guard playing tackle, but he's one of their best tackles. So he has to play that position. I expect him to be in a better physical condition because he had a knee issue going into last season. So we didn't see the best of him in the Sun Bowl. I think Rocco Spindler is really going to give Pat Coogan a run for his money for a starting spot. And then it's Baker, Wagner, and maybe even Gerby Lambert. I just think that I think Joe Rudolph is a very good coach. And I think that it will develop on a progressive basis week by week. The first game could be a little bit sketchy, though, because A&M's got a really, really good defensive line.
Tim and I still have plenty more to get to, including why he believes center Ashton Craig could be a future All-American. But first, I wanted to let you in on a really fun opportunity from our friends at FanDuel Sportsbook. I love sports. I love them so much that I never want them to stop. But as the playoffs wind down, we get fewer games, and the sports aren't sportsing quite like I want them to. But FanDuel lets me keep the sports going whenever I want. All I have to do is open the app and dream up bets anytime I'm in the mood. And this summer, FanDuel is hooking up all customers with a boost or a bonus daily. That's right. There's something for everyone every day, all summer long. All right, here's my pick for the day. Big matchup tonight between the Yankees and the Phillies, two of the best teams in baseball. I know the Yankees have been in a bit of a slump as of late, but they're underdogs on the road against the Phils, who just lost a series to my Cleveland Guardians. You can get the Yankees at plus 130 money line right now, so I would tank the Yanks tonight if I were you. So head over to FanDuel.com and start making the most out of your summer. FanDuel, an official sports betting partner of Major League Baseball. The first game usually is pretty sketchy for the offensive line. Even if you look at some of Notre Dame's best offensive lines historically, like the Duke game in 2020, I don't think you come out of that game saying, oh, Notre Dame is one of the best offensive lines in the country. Like they did not move the ball, but I think that's just pretty standard for offensive lines across the country. So on one hand, you're like, okay, Notre Dame's offensive line might struggle, but hopefully so will Texas A&M's. But my concern about the offensive line is everything to do with experience. You mentioned, like, you look at the starting unit, 4 out of 5 of them were blue chip recruits, whether it be Jagasaw, Spindler, most likely, I think, Shrouth, and then either Tosh Baker or Emil Wagner. Now, Tosh Baker's was so long ago, I don't think it counts quite the same. But the only one who isn't, or wasn't a blue chip recruit, was Ashton Craig. And like you said, he might even be the best out of all of them.
I thought he was underrated coming out of high school. I love the way he plays the game. I've said this many times on our podcast. He plays with such a wide base. He blocks a wider space than most centers do. And considering that Zeke Correll was his predecessor and was a little bit undersized, I think Ashton Craig brings a real talent to that position. I think by the end of this year, people will be saying Ashton Craig is a All-American candidate for 2025.
That would be great because I think this offensive line is so critical to the success failure of the team.
Billy Shrouth is, I mean, that was the guy that when, the people in the media kind of went crazy when in December of 2022, Howard Cross went on this long talk about how great Billy Shrouth was going to be. And then he was beaten out for a starting spot, but he was able to get his feet wet along with Ashton Craig at the end of last season. So there will be a struggle. Don't get me wrong. I'm not saying they're going to hit the ground running, but I think over time, and you have a couple games, if you can get by Texas A&M, you have a couple games to get up to speed.
Right. Survive Texas A&M, get to the Louisville game, and hopefully by that point they'll start hitting their stride. But we haven't really talked about Riley Leonard that much yet, which is kind of shocking because we're about a half hour into this and he is the quarterback. I've said this before that I believe some of the pessimism surrounding Leonard from some members of the fan base has less to do with Leonard and has more to do with the disappointment in the Sam Hartman experience, because even though I think Sam Hartman was a good quarterback for Notre Dame, he didn't live up to the savior expectations that some people placed on him before the season started. Also, Notre Dame had Jack Cohn, who was a perfectly fine quarterback. I think he was exactly what that team needed that year, but still wasn't, going to take you over the top and win you college football playoff games. So how would you evaluate Riley Leonard in comparison to the other transfer portal quarterbacks that Notre Dame has brought in, like Hartman and like Jack Cohn?
Well, I think of those 3 quarterbacks in terms of leadership, Sam Hartman will be third. I don't think there's any doubt about that. I think there were times along the way, and if you know what happened on the inside sometimes where he kind of shied away from being a leader. I don't think, Jack Cohn was a different kind of leader, but he was a rock for them. Once they were able to protect him a little bit and he wasn't running for his life and he wasn't really good at that, he was steady in the boat. And that it was really disappointing that he wasn't granted a second year by the NCAA, which I still don't really quite understand that. But I think Riley Leonard, Jack Cohn is a little more, quite a bit more understated. Whereas Riley Leonard, I think, is going to wear his emotions on his sleeve a little bit. But he has been universally accepted around Notre Dame. He has great size. He's a great athlete. If you've seen any basketball clips of him from high school, you will say he's a great athlete. We're doing a little thing on our website now, doing a little video competition of best dunkers on the football team. And I think Riley Leonard has a chance to win that if you look at his high school basketball film. But, he's a real bubbly personality. He loves Notre Dame. I don't think there's any doubt about that. The running ability, I understand that he suffered an injury that every Notre Dame fan saw last year because they were watching the game when Howard Cross injured him. So that is fresh on their mind. Then they had to redo the surgery. And so a lot of people were very concerned about, his health. He's healthy. That's not the issue now. He just needs to avoid a catastrophic injury like the one that he had last year. So I think he's going to give them great leadership. He's going to give Mike Denbrock way more options because of his ability to use his feet. He's an outstanding athlete with size.
Yeah, Riley Leonard also said that he had to stop playing basketball ever since the second surgery because once he got the first one, he was ready to go. I think he hoops all the time because, like you said, he's a really good basketball player. And if you're a really good basketball player, pickup basketball is a whole lot of fun. But it looks like he has temporarily retired from pickup basketball to focus on being the quarterback of Notre Dame. And I think all Notre Dame fans are going to be happy about that. I do have one quick follow-up, though. I was surprised to hear you say that Sam Hartman was third in leadership because they did vote him to be a team captain. Are you saying that something changed over the course of the season once the losses started to pile up? And if you feel comfortable, are you able to elaborate on that at all?
I think the losses, contributed to it. I think the lack of quality wide receivers, especially when Greathouse and Jaden Thomas were injured. Greathouse was, when he was healthy, he was targeted 22 times and he caught 18 passes. But I think Hartman was disheartened when he showed up in the spring and realized this isn't a very good receiving core. Plus, you got to remember
the offensive coordinator left.
Tommy Reese recruited him. So I think there was, right from the very beginning, there was some disillusionment. And when the Louisville game happened, I think the heart and spirit that he arrived with was negatively impacted. And you can understand. I mean, certainly you change offensive coordinators. Jared Parker's a very inexperienced offensive coordinator. He's not calling games like Tommy Reese. And I can't get receivers open to throw to. Fortunately, he had Mitchell Evans develop, but I think there was a level of discouragement when all was said and done.
It's pretty understandable for him in that position, I think. But yeah, if he sort of distanced himself from the rest of the team, I could see how that would negatively impact the rest of the roster. But a couple more quick questions on this year's team, and then we'll shift over to part two. Top to bottom, what do you think is the best position group on the roster?
I think it's I'm not gonna, because
it's good that you have to take some time.
Well, that
means there's a lot of good position groups.
I was going to say receiver because it's so deep, but
wow,
the Notre Dame receiver room has not proven itself yet. Defensive line. I don't know that RJ Oben is going to give them the pass rush that Javonte Jean-Baptiste did, but he's like Tasmanian devil in there. It isn't always real pretty, but he's nonstop. He's bouncing off of people. I think we're going to see, and this should happen. We're going to see the best version by far of Jordan Botelho. You've got the four interior defensive linemen that are outstanding. Josh Burnham should be ready to excel. Boubacar Traore is a guy that, we saw him on the practice field. He's really, really good. And then you have Bryce Young, who's a wild card. I think that is the best spot on defense. On the team, I would say, and then I would say wide receivers, because I think it's legit. I think Greathouse is good. I think a healthy Jaden Thomas is good. I believe in the three grad transfers that have arrived. You can, you look at this wide receiver. Jordan Faison he's a big time player. He's a prime time. He walked onto the football field at Louisville and he believed that he was going to make a big play, and he did. And then even guys like Micah Gilbert is going to be a really good receiver. Cam Williams is probably going to take a little bit more time. Bo Collins, I mentioned the great. I think defensive line, receivers. I think the linebacking core has a chance to be one of the better positions, but there's a lot of young guys there. So let's see how they handle the action and the stress and the pressure of being a Notre Dame football player. The secondary, it's a really, really good team.
You're getting me fired up.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not normally really big on ranking per se, although I do the first rate series.
I was just about to say, I just read your rankings.
As far as like comparing within the team, I think there are quality components. When you talk about Morrison and Watts on the back end of it, Jordan Clark, a little story about Jordan Clark. When I found out that he was coming to Notre Dame, and you start poring over every piece of video that you can find, and I'm watching him last year, 2023 at Arizona State, and I can't find a good play. And I'm like, are you kidding me? What is this guy isn't going to be, what Thomas Harper was or Tariq Bracy was. Well, you come to find out that he was absolutely playing injured. He wasn't playing hurt. He was playing injured and wouldn't come off the field. Well, then he shows up in the spring, and you see what kind of player he can be. So there's talent everywhere throughout this team. The offensive line is young, and it will struggle. I don't think there's any doubt about that. If Mitchell Evans is not ready to go against Texas A&M, then that position is going to be missing a little bit, although I think Cooper Flanagan's going to be a really good tight end too. The backfield, it hurts not having Jabron Payne, but that 1-2 punch up front is really good. They're a good team, man. They're a good team. If they can get by Texas A&M, some great things can happen.
Okay, what is the most important thing that needs to happen in order for this team to reach their full potential this season? Could have to do with the player, position group, schedule. Take this wherever you want.
Consistent pass rush from the defensive end position is really important. There's no doubt that chemistry among the offensive line, which always takes longer than in any other position, is at the forefront. I just hope it's, Texas A&M, they're down in College Station now, and they're all concerned about their offensive line too. And they know that Notre Dame has a great defensive line as well. So, obviously you got to keep Riley Leonard healthy, but again, he's healthy now. He played a full season in 2022. It could all blow up in our face at any moment. Steve Angeli is there. His development under Gino Guidugli over the course of last year from the spring and the season was incredible. But they don't have that many holes. So at the end of the day, it's pretty much, if your frontline players stay healthy, you're going to win 10, 11, maybe even 12 games if you can get by A&M. And again, I do not normally say this, Tyler. I am the most pessimistic guy going into the season. And I'm not saying Notre Dame will absolutely beat Texas A&M. It's an incredible environment that's going to be very, very difficult. But this Notre Dame team is loaded in ways that I have not verbalized in many, many, many years.
I'm ready to start the season right now. Okay, that's going to do it for part 1 of my interview with Tim Prister. Be sure to tune in to tomorrow's episode as Tim and I reflect on the past 40 years of Notre Dame football and all the highs and lows in between that Tim had a front row seat to witness. Thanks again for making this your first listen of the day. And please remember to subscribe on YouTube and wherever you're listening to the podcast. And I'll see you guys tomorrow.